Hi, I'm Jennifer Carter, and thank you for joining me on a podcast for parents, teachers, and administrators. Today's conversation should be a good one, and I'm sure it's something on your mind. So let's get to it. Why don't I have you guys introduce yourselves and sort of tell me a little bit about your podcast and then how you came to meet each other.
I don't really remember how we met. Was it being science ambassadors?
Yeah, I think so. You want to go introduce yourself, or you want me to go?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Josh Monroe. I teach 5th grade in Omaha, Nebraska. This is my 9th year of teaching. I said earlier that I teach at the school that I went to, and it's a blessing for me to be able to serve the kids that grew up just like I did. And I find such a calling for that. And I love everything about it. And Tom and I, we met when we were helping our district pick out a new science curriculum. And so we were on the science ambassador team.
Very cool. And Tom, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So my name is Tom Whisinnand. I've been teaching for about 17 years, just outside of Omaha in Millard Public Schools with Josh. I was named the 2019 National University Sanford Teacher Award Grand Prize winner.
Yay! Go you!
Yeah, really cool experience. I've done a lot of work with social emotional learning, both inside and outside of the classroom. And that's something I think Josh and I really have in common and kind of drew us together is school can be really tough, and being a human, let's be honest, can be really difficult, and raising your own children can be really trying at times.
Oh my God, say that again. For the people in the back.
When you're teaching, when you're parenting, all at the same household, it's trying. And so Josh and I had this idea to really get out there and try to talk with people and provide a glimmer of hope and inspiration. And so we started What the World Needs Now. It's a podcast that's available, and Josh can tell you all the whys and wherefores about where, but it's on YouTube. And I gotta be really honest. Josh is really humble because he is an extraordinary individual when it comes to putting social emotional learning at the forefront and using what do I want to say, social media to really further the social emotional understanding. So Josh, I think, should tell us a little bit about your TikTok experience.
Yeah, so when I call it crisis learning when COVID hit, because we were just all thrown into this and didn't really have time to plan. But I was having trouble getting my kids to come to Zoom meetings. But when we were in the classroom, they talked about TikTok nonstop. Every Friday we have this extra recess time, and they'd make TikToks. Out at recess, they'd make TikToks. They'd talk about all these other things that they see on TikTok, and it hit me. I was like, I'm just going to start my account, and I'm going to make it private. And if you come to the Zoom meeting and you stay the whole time, I will show you my TikTok at the very end. And so I did that for the rest of the school. And then I opened it up and made it public. And it's gotten really big. I've got over 650,000 followers.
Wow.
But it's changed a lot since then. And that's what I love so much about it, because before it was just to get kids to Zoom. And then I made a video showing something that I do in my class that relates to social emotional learning. And that's all I do now. And so now I just use that platform to share how much teachers love and care for kids and all the amazing things that people are doing. And I think it's important to share too, that what I put out there is not just unique to me. That's what all of us are doing every single day. I'm just sharing it. So.
Well, I love that, you've made that connection. Well, first off, I love that Tom introduced that aspect of you. And then I love that you share that aspect of yourself with your students, because like at the preschool level, we literally assess how kids are progressing with their social and emotional skills. But I taught high school for a long time. I taught 9th and 12th graders. And then I taught elementary, and I've been working my way down and out. So like up to adults and then down to preschool for some years, right? And in the preschool level, it's heavily emphasized as a foundation, which is great, but there's not as much as a momentum as kids continue. And the older they get, the more challenging social navigation is and emotional endurance becomes. But there's not necessarily a lot of support for that. So why don't you guys tell us, what you encounter that makes social and emotional learning so important, and then how it manifests in your class?
I just think social emotional well-being and learning is just really almost fundamental to what it is to be human. And I think to really get the most out of other people, but also yourself, you really need to be in tune with the skills and strategies that social emotional learning encompasses, right? And so you brought up a great point. Where do we go as a society when, the preschoolers, 3, 4, 5-year-olds are taught explicitly the skills and emotions and the emotions that go along with frustration or aggravation. And then we expect them to have it and to play and do school when you get into kindergarten, first, second, and then where Josh and I teach, 3rd, 4th, 5th, man, kids need to have those skills, and some of them don't. And so it really comes into play there. It comes to play into middle school, because if we're having kids go up the educational ladder who haven't mastered them for whatever reason, whether it's trauma or whether it's a lack of understanding and just I think as a society, we're so quick to move on and move kids on and expect behavior that is in line with what school is. And so I think that what I'm seeing in my classroom is impulsivity and the lack of being able to restrain your impulsivity. And we talk carte blanche about that. Hey, in order to be successful, you need to restrain your impulse to blurt out or to argue or yell or throw a chair. Just things that people should know how to do, but we need to address that and not address it in a behavior way, but a skill way, right? Like, what are the skills that you need to be able to restrain your impulsivity? Is it being able to listen and wait your turn? Is it the ability to, I don't know, just really not, like, maybe you need to name your emotion. Maybe you're disappointed in yourself for not getting something done, but that manifests in yelling at me when I ask you to get out your homework. There's just a number of skills that we work on, and I know Josh is the same way in his classroom as well. But I think that as a society, we can't pigeonhole social emotional learning into preschool. And I know as an adult, when I started really getting into the social emotional frame of mind, it changed me as a person, not just as an educational practitioner, but I then needed to start practicing the skills that I'm expecting out of other people and modeling those same skills.
Yeah, and the modeling part's so important too, because then kids see us as humans, that we've got these same feelings too. And I get angry, but I'm not going to rip up my paper. It's okay to have those emotions, but let's figure out healthy ways. And so then it moves away from the punishment and more towards, it's okay to have these feelings, but let me help you figure out how to navigate those feelings.
Because, my experience is that everything looks like anger. Disappointment looks like anger. Frustration, humiliation looks like anger. And calling it what it is, because then that does a couple of things. It honors what's actually happening, and it gives everybody a point of reflection, right? So like if I were having a day in class and I was frustrated with their behavior, the behavior in my class, I might even say, I'm really frustrated with you guys, or I'm really disappointed with you guys, or I'm thrilled to see this happening here, and literally calling it what you see, because then they can better identify, because they don't necessarily have the language. Like on the preschool level, they don't have the literally the vocabulary to say that I am confused or perplexed or humiliated, but that's the emotion they feel. And then as they get the language, having, like you said, having them be able to articulate that and call the emotion what it is helpful. And let me also say it's especially helpful coming from two men, because men, I mean, how many times have you heard man up? I don't even know what that means. Like, does that mean like if I'm upset, I put on a beard? I don't even know what that's supposed to mean.
Or don't cry. Don't cry is a big one that we hear. And I mean, this year I've cried in front of my kids. And I tell them why. We just got done taking our MAP assessment, which shows growth. And I saw their results and I started crying, and they asked, what's wrong? What's wrong? I was like, nothing's wrong. I'm just so proud. But that's the modeling that they need to see. It's okay to have these emotions. It's 100% okay. And it's really powerful when they're able to hear, I'm just like you.
One thing that really a switch went on for me is when I read a book by the author Marc Brackett. He's out of Yale University, and it's called Permission to Feel. And in his book, Marc Brackett talks about taking a meta moment, just a pause, and it can be a pause within yourself to identify those emotions, so that when I'm dealing with my own children who are not following directions when it's time to get in the shower, and I've told them 4 times, I want to be angry. But is it really angry, or is it disappointed? Is it sadness? Is it stress that I have something that I need to do when they're in bed? Really identifying that emotion in that meta moment then frees us up to experience that emotion and not react to them and that emotion. So I think that's an important principle, that as adults in social emotional learning, we take that meta moment to really reflect on the emotions that we are feeling, so that we are able to model the appropriate behavior of whatever it is that we're presented with.
I may have to read that, because my 22-year-old son who just graduated from college is here, and I have several moments where I need a meta moment with that guy, because dealing with another adult, that's a whole thing. And speaking of, how do you convince parents that what you're doing is worthwhile? Because how many times, like, here's the interesting thing, right? Parents are 100% on board for you to teach them all about biology and all of their biological functions, until you get to the things that involve their emotions that drive a lot of and then they're like, don't talk about that. They don't need that. They need math. So how do you get parents to buy in and understand that these things are inextricably connected?
We had our school read a book called Help for Billy, and it was in the first couple pages. They talk about stressors and how they can close the window for learning in kids. And so I just open that book for parents, and I say, when they have these feelings, that window closes. So I know you want me to teach them how to divide with fractions. I know you want them to reach this goal on their state assessment. I can't do that though when that window continues to close. So let me focus in on how to get that window to open. And I think that when parents are presented with it in that form, they open up a little bit more. They understand. They're able to visualize a little bit with that window metaphor.
Do you do any parent education in addition to what you do with kids, or do you primarily work with kids?
I do not.
I bring the parents in, and something that I do is I just try to explain. We're all about the whole child, and part of it is the social emotional well-being of your child. And I think what Josh talks about when he's talking about the improvement that he sees in his class's MAP scores speaks volumes to that. If I'm socially and emotionally well adjusted, my academic performance will improve. I think another measure is when kids go home, they're gonna notice a difference. Parents will notice a difference in their child. How was school? It was all right. How was school? That was good. I enjoyed myself. As human beings, when we are socially and emotionally well adjusted, engaged, we tend to be happier people. We tend to be better to be around, right? And so,
oh
no. So I think it's important that the parents do see that in their children. And I don't do anything for training as far as parents go. Either. I see kids leaving the classroom happy. I hear parents emailing back that our kid loves school. They're happy to be there. It's not a battle to get up and get them in the morning. They want to be there. If a kid's sick, hey, we're sorry they're sick. They want to come to school. I have to email back, sorry, please leave them at home, stay.
especially now.
Right. Yeah.
I'm just saying.
Oh, yeah.
Hey there. If you've gotten this far into the episode, chances are that you really like what you're listening. I'm going to ask you to press pause and share this particular episode with 5 people that you think would really enjoy listening to it. I'm also going to ask that you subscribe to our podcast so that you don't miss an episode. Thank you so much for listening, and now let's get back to the conversation.
So here's my question for you. You guys are very modest, but you're in your own right. You're famous, right? So how does your district, do you feel like your district is supporting the work you do? And then in what ways? And how are you able to help colleagues and things like that also do what you're doing?
I think Millard is an amazing, hands down, supportive school district. And I think Josh and I hope I'm not putting too many words in your mouth, Josh, but we are both very blessed and fortunate to work at a school district. When I first got into the social emotional on the bandwagon, I guess, I ran into a program called Harmony, and it's a social emotional curriculum through National University. It's 100% free. There's an online app that goes, it's 100% free. There's no in-app purchases or anything. And I brought it to Millard and said, this is a great resource. And they did some research and they adopted it as a social emotional curriculum district-wide. And then when it's called Harmony Game Room came out, they put it on all of our district issued iPads. It's available to all kids pre-K through grade 6 on their iPads. So they're connected to social emotional learning if they want to be at home or at school. And I feel very supported by Millard. So there's my answer to that.
Yeah, I think Millard does a great job. If we go back 2 years ago, our superintendent, Dr. Sutphin, made part of our development as teachers social emotional learning. So he calls it part of our pie. So part of our pie was focusing in on how do we help students socially and emotionally grow. And yeah, I echo the words that Tom says. I feel blessed and totally supported by the work that we do.
Wow. That is a rarity because many school districts are overwhelmed with things that are so far away from this. It's a little disheartening to see how priorities get made in districts. Only because the urgency of so many things are right there, right? Where do we put social emotional learning when kids don't have enough to eat? Or where do we put social emotional learning when test scores are so low or we have so many English language learners? And I don't know about the composition of your district, but I think, some of the bigger districts, like I certainly know in the LA area, that's something that people struggle with. But at my school, Oak Tree, it's like I said, it's in San Bernardino with all the demographics that make that area challenging. And we have a program for preschool Then we also have a program for, like, we do an after school program that has become into a distance learning support program. And we do a lot of those skills that practice social and emotional development because it's a project-based center. It's a curriculum that I developed where everything that happens at the center, the kids do. So they're doing a Christmas play. They wrote the play, they're building the sets, they're coming up with the lines, they're building the program, like everything, right? And because of that, they have to cooperate and interact with each other a lot. But what advice would you give to other people in other places who may be acting? Because we're all lucky, right? You know, I'm the captain of my own ship. You're in a ship with a captain that's sailing on the sea that you want to be on. But what kind of advice would you give to colleagues who really are doing this in isolation that may not have the support of parents or their principal or district?
And that's hard when I've taught in Millard my entire career. So I've just felt blessed with and I went there. So I felt blessed with everything. I think that making sure you surround yourself with like-minded people is important. And even if that's not in person, if it's on Twitter or whatever social media you choose to follow, but making sure that you're continuing to surround yourself with people who, in my opinion, do what's best for kids. Because I think that assessments have a place in education. So don't get me wrong when I say this, but focusing in on the social and emotional growth and health of our children, that should be our top priority. Because without that, they're not going to learn. And so I think making sure that we can surround ourselves with people that think and feel and love like we do.
I'd echo what Josh says, and I think I think food scarcity and insecurities, it's real, and that needs to be dealt with. And I think the pandemic has pushed education a ways ahead of where we would be without the pandemic. I was listening to NPR, and they said that it has pushed businesses about 5 years into the future and made them come up with strategies and ideas about 5 years into the future. Well, if it's that way for business, it's probably 10 or 12 years faster than education, because education's behind some. But I think that the pandemic has made school districts deal with food insecurity, deal with internet insecurity, and deal with some of these other issues. I think individuals who are in a silo, really, like Josh said, need to connect. But I also think that people who are in silos have an amazing opportunity to really be those shining beacons. And I think that if you look at the information that's come out from top-notch organizations, they want people who are collaborative. They want people who are creative. They want people who are good communicators. They want the intangibles that social emotional learning really is. And so I think coming out of here, those individuals who are more social and emotionally adjusted will be able to pick up the math. They will be able to pick up the reading. They will be able to pick up the skills. Whereas some people who may not be able to collaborate effectively will have a rougher time picking up those academic skills because they lack the human ability to interact in a constructive way.
You know, I always use the example of astronauts, because no one ever goes into space by themselves. It's always on a team, and you are stuck in a space that's like the size of my cursor, my mouse, for however long you're stuck in space. And so you have to have a high level of social and emotional skills. So as you say, like, as teachers are kind of independent and by themselves, what you guys are saying in terms of being a beacon or emphasizing and just doing their thing in their own class, because, you know, like, you can't hide light and darkness, right? If there's a bleak situation and you are the person that's illuminating the value of building resilient kids, that's not going to stay hidden. You know, it will be something that people notice. And so this may be a more challenging question, but how do you navigate around all of the stuff that's been happening right now? How do you navigate around that when kids bring it up? Because I know they do.
Absolutely. I think this generation of children that Josh and I are dealing with, the fourth graders, the fifth graders, the middle schoolers, even the high schoolers, have a tremendous sense of passion. I think they have a tremendous sense of, I think, empathy. This generation gets it. They see that there's unrest. They see that things aren't right. They feel it. They want to talk about it. They want to have these discussions. The fourth graders that I deal with are curious. They want to understand why there's the unrest and why it's happening. And I think it's, as a society, as educators, we are really, again, blessed with an opportunity to speak truth to the children who sometimes may have been tuned out earlier, and really get to the human side of things. And so I think that the conversations that we have in class it's really unfortunate that our president behaves that way.
Oh, you can say that on this podcast. Feel free.
All right.
Feel free.
I'll bet off now.
Person of color, woman, feel free.
Hey, we ask that, or how do you want the world to be when you are old like me? How can we create this world? Because I tell my children, you are going to create the world that you want. And I think that is super empowering. We had on our podcast, we had a wonderful woman, Arlinda Davis, and she said that she is preparing children to inherit society. And I found that so profound. And I think as educators, as parents, if we view what we're doing through that lens, what kind of inheritance do we want to give coming after us?
Like I said, that is something that, again, as we're talking about, if we're trying to teach kids to be honest with themselves, we have to be honest and call that crap out when we see it as well. And, sometimes people worry about ramifications, but I'm like, ramifications out the window. Truth is truth. Cut it out.
And I think sometimes it can be hard when there's all this talk, especially recently, that teachers are indoctrinating kids with all this. And then we have the president who goes and does something, and it's hard sometimes we get scared to say something. And I think Tom nailed it on the head, where you just say, would that be an expected or an unexpected behavior? Somebody in our class said something like that to a friend. Unexpected. Okay, thank you. And then move on. You're right. That's unexpected. Thanks.
Yeah.
And helping kids understand that you stole the quote that I was going to use from Arlinda. Helping them understand you're going to inherit society. This world is going to change because of the beautiful and wonderful things that you're going to do. And let's move in that direction.
Yeah. Everybody has to be welcomed. I invite, like at my center, we have the full gamut of people, and my kids can't practice their social and emotional without having a far, far away opinion where you are totally in disagreement. That's okay. It's how do you engage in that discourse? And when you engage in that discourse in a nasty way, that's not what we do here. You can be totally opposite and appreciate each other's differences and understand each other's differences without being a jerk to each other. And that, I think, is the bottom line for any kind of social behavior, any kind of emotional behavior. Because why?
We in our class practice, we're not a leader in me school, but in my class, we practice what Sean Covey wrote in his book. And one of the habits is seek first to understand, then be understood. And so it's all about making sure that you're listening to what somebody says and not just hearing it, but truly listening. I think that can be really powerful too, is are you actually listening, or are you just hearing what I say?
Now I'm going to throw you a curveball. What happens when you're trying to listen and the person on the other end has no interest in hearing you? How do you advise your kids to, because that's what we're seeing a lot. People want to stay in their echo chambers and they're happy to do so. So what what's the advice in a situation like that for you guys?
I think that's going to happen. I love that you brought up the echo chamber, right? We're happy to stay there. I like this. It's about me. But what I tell them is that the more you understand, the better you are. Maybe not this time because whoever you're talking with doesn't care what you have to say, but at least you are open and you've matured and you've heard another perspective. And maybe this individual is so far removed that you cannot reason, you cannot talk with them, but at least you understand where they're coming from. So that if something does happen, if something does change for them, you have that relationship. And it's not a rocky relationship. It's a relationship that they know, hey, this person didn't treat me like a jerk. This person listened to me. This person valued my opinion, even if I didn't value theirs. And I think there's a lot of power that comes with that. And if we're talking about modeling that behavior, we really need to become experts at holding our tongue and just really understanding where the other person's coming from.
And if we're going to talk with kids, I tell them, make sure that your friend's okay to talk. Ask them, are we okay to speak right now? Because sometimes you're not, and that's okay. As adults, I ask the same question, just in a different form. Are we going to have a civil discussion right now? Because if it can be civil, we can still be cool. But if it's not civil, like you can be on your side and I can be on mine, and we can still be friends. But if we can't be civil about it, then this isn't going to go well for either of us. And it's okay to walk away. And I think telling kids that too. Well, I don't tell my kids that, but telling people that it's okay sometimes to walk away from things. It's okay to say, we can't be civil about this. Let's just not talk about it then.
But isn't that a good lesson also? Like knowing when you may make some strides or you may come together and then accepting when you can't, because then that's a whole nother thing, because then you have to figure out, do I still want to be around this person? What are the attributes that attract me to this person and that makes me want to continue to engage with them? And again, that's more that meta moment, of self-reflection. Why am I persisting in this relationship if it's this difficult? And that's sometimes a hard thing for us adults, especially when you're dating, but, in every situation, right? Whether it's a romantic relationship or a work relationship, or even a relative where every time you get together, you feel like crap once you're done talking to each other,
I think one thing you need to look at is, as a society, is the commonalities that we have. I think if we focus on the differences, we're going to get more different. If we focus on commonalities, it tends to bring people together. I think if we focus on commonalities, we can have those discussions. And it doesn't mean I have to love the entire individual. I don't have to love everything this individual says, but the things that I have in common are X, Y, Z. And then I can value this individual for X, Y, Z. It doesn't mean that I love the whole package. That may not be necessary, but at least I can value their humanity then. And I think at some point we got away from valuing the humanity of each other, and we need to get, in my opinion, get back to that.
I would argue we never did. But then I'm biased. I grew up in Cleveland. It's super segregated. It's segregated by race. It's segregated by class. Like, it's so funny when I meet someone from Cleveland and they're around my age or like a little older, a little younger, if they're Jewish, I know what neighborhood they're from. If they're Italian, I know what neighborhood they're from. If they're Black, I know. And, I feel like in some ways, when I was growing up, people had to work together because, it's a blue collar town and you just kind of come together and then you go back to wherever that is. But, you know, it's different than what you're talking about, Tom, where there is true value in the overlap. You know, there's much more focus on we're different, let's go to our own little places, as opposed to, you know, you may live in this neighborhood, I may live, but I really enjoy X, Y, and Z. I think it's moving toward that, believe it or not. But I don't think it was like that when I was a kid growing up, you know. I know it's very different for my children and your children. I don't know how old your kids are, but I'm sure, you know, it'll be very different for them growing up because kids don't seem to be bothered by that stuff.
I hope that's the case. I really, with all of my being, I hope that's the case.
Yes.
Me too. And my kids are 3 and 4, and my stepdad is African American. And for me, when him and my mom got married, it opened my eyes to a lot of things that I think that I was ignorant of. And it's helping me grow as a person, as a teacher, as a father. And I hope we are moving in that direction, because I see in my children what I want. The way that they love Pop, the way that they love Nana, his mom, just the way that they unconditionally love because of the people that they are. And I hope you're right. I hope that's what we're moving towards, because this last summer was rough.
I think it was good though. It's sort of like, I know this is kind of gross, but it's sort of like when you have a bad belly and you throw up, and then afterwards you feel all disoriented, but you feel better. I think we're in the, wait, I feel better, but you know, I'm still a little disoriented. I think that's where we are.
All right, then it's about to get better.
Because, you know, we've been able to ignore a lot of that stuff for a very long time, you know, and now all the muck is out there and we're seeing it. Like we see all these examples and we have to come to terms with that and then have conversations about it, because kids are going to see and they're going to ask. And, you know, like I said, we're in that awkward, like, how do we deal with this gross aftermath? But that's where I think it'll get better.
I think you're right. I think the conversations that the children are bringing into the classrooms, Josh and I think both have students that are pretty in touch. And the parents, the conversations that they're having, they're forced to have, because you said it's all over. It's not going away. And I think those conversations are helping to move us towards being better.
And I sit on that conversations are always going to help us as long as they're civil. Then we're always going to grow, whether we agree or not. We're gonna learn and grow.
Well, I'm looking at the time, and I kind of like that we ended talking about vomit. So I think, you know, maybe that's kind of where we could kind of wrap up our conversation. Did you guys have any, do you want to tell them where to find your podcast, What the World Needs Now? Or I'm sorry, is it a podcast or would you just call it a YouTube channel? You tell me.
It's kind of both. We have the YouTube channel, and Josh, tell them all the platforms we're on with the podcast.
Yeah, so you can find us on What the World Needs Now on Spotify, on Apple Podcast, on Deezer, on iHeartRadio. There's a bunch that I've never even heard of, so it's out there. And then again, I'm Josh Monroe. You can find me on Twitter at Mr. Monroe EDU. You can find me on Instagram and TikTok at Mr. Monroe and Nala. Nala is my therapy dog that comes to class with me, so she's really the star of everything. But so that's where you can find me.
And what about you, Tom?
I'm Thomas Wiz, THOWHIZ, at Thomas Wiz on Twitter, Thomas Wiz on Instagram. And it's just been, Mrs.C, this is amazing. This has been so much fun. Thank you so much for having us. What an incredible experience.
Well, I'm so glad, you know, and I would, if you want me to hop on your show, and I don't know what I would talk about, but I talk a lot, so I could probably talk about something, but it has been so refreshing and just what I needed for my spirit. So I really appreciate it.
Us too. This has been awesome for us. Thank you for having us.
So that's our conversation for today. I hope you found some information that was interesting or a perspective that you hadn't thought of. If you like what you heard, or even if you have some feedback, put a comment in our comment section. Be sure to like our page and make sure that you subscribe so that you can hear when the next video comes out. Thanks so much again for joining us.